People of the pre-Islamic period, whilst believing in superstition, they still retained some of the Abrahamic traditions such as devotion to the holy sanctuary, circumambulation, observance of pilgrimage, the vigil on Arafah and offering sacrifices. All of these were observed fully despite some innovations that adulterated these holy rituals. Quraysh, for example, out of arrogance, feeling of superiority to other tribes, and pride in their custodianship of the sacred house, would refrain from going to Arafah with the crowd. Instead, they would stop short at Muzdalifah. The noble Quran rebuked them and told them, "Then depart from the place whence all the people depart." Surah 2, verse 199. Another heresy, deeply established in their social tradition, dictated that they would not eat dried yogurt or cook it fat, nor would they enter a tent made of camel hair or seek shade unless in a house of adobe bricks, so long as they were committed to the intention of pilgrimage. They also, out of a deeply rooted misconception, denied pilgrims, other than Makkans, access to the food they had brought when they wanted to make a pilgrimage, or lesser pilgrimage. They ordered pilgrims coming from outside Makkah to circumambulate Al-Kaaba in Quraysh uniform clothes. But if they could not afford them, men were to do so in a state of nudity, and women with only some piece of cloth to hide their groins. Allah says in this concern, "O children of Adam, take your adornment by wearing your clean clothes, while praying and going around the tawaf of the Kaaba." Surah 7, verse 31. If men or women were generous enough to go round Al-Kaaba in their clothes, they had to discard them after circumambulation for good. When the Makkans were in a pilgrimage consecration state, they would not enter their houses through the doors, but through holes they used to dig in the back walls. They used to regard such behavior as deeds of piety and God-fearing. This practice was prohibited by the Quran. It is not al-bir, piety, righteousness, that you enter the houses from the back, but al-bir is the quality of the one who fears Allah. So enter houses through their proper doors, and fear Allah that you may be successful. Surah 2, verse 189. Such was the religious life in Arabia: polytheism, idolatry, and superstition. Judaism, Christianity, Magianism, and Sabianism, however, could find their ways easily into Arabia. The migration of the Jews from Palestine to Arabia passed through two phases. First, as a result of the pressure to which they were exposed, the destruction of their temple, and taking most of them as captives to Babylon at the hand of the king Bukhtanasar. In the year 587 BC, some Jews left Palestine for Hejaz and settled in the northern areas whereof. The second phase started with the Roman occupation of Palestine under the leadership of Roman Butts in 70 AD. This resulted in a tidal wave of Jewish migration into Hejaz and Yathrib, Khaybar, and Taima in particular. Here, they made proselytes of several tribes, built forts and castles, and lived in villages. Judaism managed to play an important role in the pre-Islam political life. When Islam dawned on that land, there had already been several famous Jewish tribes: Khaybar, Al-Mustalik, An-Nadir, Qurayza, and Kainuga. In some versions, the Jewish tribes counted as many as 20. Judaism was introduced into Yemen by someone called As'ad Abi Karb. He had gone to fight in Yathrib, and there he embraced Judaism, and then went back taking with him 2 rabbis from Bani Qurayza to instruct the people of Yemen in this new religion. Judaism found fertile soil there to propagate and gain adherents. After his death, his son Yusuf du Nawas rose to power, attacked the Christian community in Najran, and ordered them to embrace Judaism. When they refused, he ordered that a pit of fire be dug and all the Christians indiscriminately be dropped to burn therein. Estimates say that between 20–40,000 Christians were killed in that human massacre. The Quran related part of that story in Al-Buruj, Zodiacal Signs chapter. Christianity had first made its appearance in Arabia following the entry of the Abyssinian, Ethiopian, and Roman colonists into that country. The Abyssinian, Ethiopian colonization forces in league with Christian missions entered Yemen as a retaliatory reaction to the iniquities of Du Nawas, and started vehemently to propagate their faith ardently. They even built a church and called it Yemeni al-Kaaba, with the aim of directing the Arab pilgrimage caravans towards Yemen, and then made an attempt to demolish the sacred house in Makkah. Allah, the Almighty, however, did punish them and made an example of them, here and hereafter. A Christian missionary called Phimeon and known for his ascetic behavior and working miracles, had likewise infiltrated into Najran. There he called people to Christianity, and by virtue of his honesty and truthful devotion, he managed to persuade them to respond positively to his invitation and embrace Christianity. The principal tribes that embraced Christianity were Ghassan, Taghlib, Tai, and some Himyarite kings, as well as other tribes living on the borders of the Roman Empire. Magonism was also popular among the Arabs living in the neighborhood of Persia, Iraq, Bahrain, Al-Ahsa, and some areas on the Arabian Gulf Coast. Some Yemenis are also reported to have professed Magonism during the Persian occupation. As for Sabianism, excavations in Iraq revealed that it had been popular amongst Chaldean folks, the Syrians and Yemenis. With the advent of Judaism and Christianity, however, Sabianism began to give way to the new religions, although it retained some followers mixed or adjacent to the Magians in Iraq and the Arabian Gulf. The religious situation. Such was the religious life of the Arabians before the advent of Islam. The role that the religions prevalent played was so marginal. In fact, it was next to nothing. The polytheists, who faked Abrahamism, were so far detached from its precepts and totally oblivious of its imminent good manners. They plunged into disobedience and ungodliness and developed certain peculiar religious superstitions that managed to leave a serious impact on the religious and socio-political life in the whole of Arabia. Judaism turned into abominable hypocrisy, in league with hegemony. Rabbis turned into lords to the exclusion of the Lord. They got involved in the practice of dictatorial subjection of people and calling their subordinates to account for the least word or idea. Their sole target turned into acquisition of wealth and power, even if it were at the risk of losing their religion, or the emergence of atheism and disbelief. Christianity likewise opened its doors wide to polytheism and got too difficult to comprehend as a heavenly religion. As a religious practice, it developed a sort of peculiar medley of man and God. It exercised no bearing whatsoever on the souls of the Arabs who professed it simply because it was alien to their style of life and did not have the least relationship with their practical life. People of other religions were similar to the polytheists with respect to their inclinations, dogmas, customs, and traditions.